Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of Afterbirth modding tutorials, and in this one I'm going to teach you how you can add costumes with our items. A costume is considered anything that alters your sprite as soon as you pick it up. So let's say you pick up ceremonial robes, then you actually get ceremonial robes over your head, or maybe if you pick up sad onion then you start crying. That's also considered a costume. I'm going to show you how we can actually apply that in the game. I'm not going to be explaining how to actually create mods and sprite sheet or animations, but I'm going to be telling you how to incorporate that into the game after you've done so. A huge shout out to a Steam user called Nix who actually created a mod called Explorer's Hat, which implements this properly, and I did use it as a template for creating my own, or just to figure out how it actually works. So if you want to check that out, click on the screen somewhere around now, or go in the description and there will be a Steam Workshop link there. So with that said, let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is open our Isaac animation editor. And the second thing I'll just open up my poopy tears animation, which just adds a static 4 streaks which are supposed to represent tears, and they're poopy tears because they're badly drawn and not because they have anything to do with poop. But yeah, a few things you have to kind of watch out for when you are creating your animation. So whenever you're creating your animation, you have to be watchful of that you have 4 animation types or 4 animation names, and they should be called head down, head right, head left, and head up, and they correspond basically to in which direction Isaac is looking at. So let's say that you want to create a mod which has the agents 47's tattoo on the back of his head, then that would correspond to head down, because at that time he's actually looking down. Or if the head is up, obviously, and you want to put an eye patch over it, then you would do that there. And some items obviously use more of these animations, but what's important that all of the 4 animations are there, and each of them corresponds in which direction Isaac is actually looking at. They can be empty, that's no problem. Like in my case, I just made one for head down just to kind of demonstrate. And in this case, it's not even an animation, it's just a static image of 4 streaks of blue paint that I made in Photoshop very, very fast. And now that you actually created your animations and you have them named, and maybe you put your sprite sheet in, another thing that you have to be watchful for, that you create this on a layer called head 4. For some reason, if you don't do it on a layer called head 4, I just had struggles. It didn't actually want to work in game for whatever reason. So just name the layer head 4 and you'll be on your merry way when you actually start making these animations. If you don't want to worry about creating your new file and just creating these animations, maybe you don't know really what to do, what you can do is go in your resources folder in your Isaac main folder where it's installed, unpack everything, and then actually find one of the animation files that exist for an official item, and then basically just change the sprite sheet and the animation and rename it, and you don't really have to worry about setting all of this up. But once you do, and once, like I said, you have these 4 animations and your layer name is head 4, you can actually export it as animation too. And remember, when you put your sprite sheet, in this case, you can see that my sprite sheet location is located under costumes, costume Explorer Hat 3. And like I said, I did use that as a template, so that's why it's called Explorer Hat 3. I thought it had something to do with it, but the name can be anything you want it to be, doesn't matter what its name is. And once we do that, we actually can put this in our folder. You can put it wherever you want, but I decided to put it under costume. So that's our main mod folder, resources, GFX, characters, and here is our animation folder, and then of course the sprite sheet is in a folder called costumes, and then our sprite sheet, in this case just one single picture. Then again, we have the items folder. This is basically the same as any other video, so you can go check those out if you want to figure out how to set this up. And another thing we have to do to actually get this working is add a new XML file under our content folder. In this case, we just call it costumes2.xml. And what we put in here is basically just the path to our animation. So in this case, it's located under GFX characters, that's our root. So that is basically where this will start searching for our animation files. And we are just saying that the animation path 2 is poopytears.anm2. And I know you might be wondering, but how does this thing know that it's actually applied whenever you pick up an item you created? And in the official files, there's an ID, but for some reason, if you put an ID here, it actually crashes. And what I suspect this does is it finds the first item that it exists in this case. So let's say that we go under our items.xml, and we can see again, I just took the collectibles Explorer's Hat, and in this case, this is the first item that's in the items.xml. So what the game does, it applies this costume on the first item in here. So if you had more items, I suspect that the second item would be applied to the second custom, etc. So this way it's a bit more modular, and I like the way they're doing it, and there's really no complications here, and don't really have to write any code as well. And actually, you know, this is it. I just told you everything that's important that you have to know. So let's hop into the game and just see how this works. So now that we're in the game, I've enabled the mod called custom, and let's see if it works. So what we do basically in this case is just give ourselves the item called C501, because that's the ID of our item. In this case, again, it's Explorer's Head, because I use that mod as a template. And once we do that, you can see that the custom is applied. But because the custom is only applied in head down position, which is what I actually said in the animation file, you can only see my very poopy tears when I'm actually looking down. So you can imagine that you can create a lot of things with this. If you want to create maybe a blinking eye, for an example, you can do that. There's no problem there. And obviously you would only apply that when you're looking down, and of course there wouldn't be anything if you looked up, or maybe you could do something else with it. Or maybe if you wanted to patch like a hole through Isaac's eye, which is very morbid, but you know, some items maybe you want to do that, then you would also showcase this on the front and the back of Isaac's head. So I think that this is actually a very powerful tool if you want to give some spirit and more persona to your items whenever you pick them up. And I think, like I said, you can do a lot of things with it. If you want a more modular approach to this, maybe if you want different costumes that change, so let's say that you want to change Isaac's sprite depending on maybe how many times he got hit, what you could possibly do is create a bunch of dummy items, so-called dummy items, which don't really do anything. And depending on how many times you get hit, you can just apply those dummy items on Isaac, and then those dummy items will actually grant him the right costumes. And I think that would be a nice or a good way of going about it. So this is the end of this video, and there's been a lot of requests on how to actually add costumes, and I just didn't do it earlier because I didn't know how to. So again, a huge shout out to the user called NextNext who for actually figuring this out and for actually being so kind to actually tell me yesterday on a comment that he's glad that his mod is of use. And of course, you know, like with anything, the first hurdle is usually the hardest, just figuring things out. Obviously now in retrospect, when I showed this, it wasn't that difficult to actually implement, but not knowing the intricacies and the technicalities, it can really kind of put a damper on things. So another thing I want to say or talk about is if you actually want to see a specific mod or a specific thing made, or maybe you just don't know how to do a certain thing, please leave me a comment. If it's an easy thing or maybe a relatively short thing, I'll just reply to it, and obviously you can hopefully learn from that. But if it's maybe a bigger thing, or maybe if a lot of you want it, I'll create another video, because at this point I've actually exhausted the basic things that you can do in the API. And I think at this point, if you actually figure out and combine the techniques from all of the videos, you can pretty much create any mod that you want. You can create familiars, which should, you can create new items, you can create, okay, maybe not new enemies, but you can even create new enemies, because what you could do is combine the animations and then actually program the logic yourself. The things that I didn't cover and I think are not even possible yet is how to add items to item pools. So I'll do that as soon as actually that is available, or that we can actually do that. And how to actually create new rooms by adding our own custom enemies into them. And I also think that's not possible yet. So, you know, as improvements come, I'll actually get new ideas. But at this point, I'm just actually looking and reaching out for you to maybe, if you actually want something explained again, or maybe if you want something different explained that I maybe didn't cover well enough in my video. So just please let me know if there is anything like that. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.